After leaving college in the mid to late 80s, I also left church. I sort of drifted away, I guess you would say. I wasn't angry about anything. It wasn't sudden. I just sort of drifted off. I guess I told myself in those days, I was young then, I didn't need church. But after about 10 years, I started drifting back. I didn't drift all the way back, you understand. I came back on Easter. I found that Easter crowds were very comfortable to me because, well, let's just say a whole lot of other people drift back on Easter. So I was among others like myself. And then, as the years passed, I continued to drift back on Easter. Every year, I came back on Easter. And I began to ask myself, what am I looking for when I come back to church on Easter? Why do I feel drawn back on Easter? And then I realized what it was. It was that I wanted to find out if they were still telling the story of the resurrection. I did not want that story to be lost. And I didn't want it to be lost to me either. Well, today we are going to read together John's Gospel story of the empty tomb, which could be described as a comedy in 3 acts. And you will find out more later why. It has a lot of comedic touches in it. But it opens in Act 1 with Mary Magdalene coming to the tomb. Listen with me to this very lovely story in the Gospel of John, chapter 20, beginning with verse 1. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went to the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappers lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the other linen wrappings, but rolled up in a piece by itself. Then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw 2 angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. In Act 1, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb to mourn. She did not have spices with her, so she was not going to anoint the body. All she wanted to do was to weep. She probably hadn't gotten much sleep the night before, and she was beside herself when she arrived, and she only wanted to just sit in that place where Jesus was laid and weep. But the best laid plans. She started toward the tomb, and the first thing she noticed was the stone was rolled away. Oh my goodness, that was the very first surprise of many that we're going to hear about in this story today. So instead of weeping, she had to interrupt her grief for just a moment and ask herself, I wonder how that stone got over there. I mean, that stone is really heavy. Who could possibly have moved that stone? Then she took a bigger chance. She got a little bit nearer to the opening of the tomb, and she poked her head in just a little bit, and she peeked in, and she saw there was no body. Oh my gosh. So she immediately ran away. That's how we begin Act 2. She ran to get Peter and John. Once she had gotten to their house, they started running too. They started running to the tomb, Peter and John. In fact, they had a race. I guess you could call it kind of an Easter morning sort of race to get to the tomb. Now, when's the last time you have raced to a tomb? In fact, did you run to church today? I didn't. Anyway, this is a very funny scene for any Hebrew to watch, because no proper Hebrew man would ever run. I mean, for one thing, how are you supposed to run in all these clothes? And then there's those sandals. I mean, you could trip and fall. And running was a sign of being undignified. So grown men never ran. No. But there they were, running toward the tomb. Did you say a tomb? Who would ever want to run to a tomb? I mean, what are you going to find there? And, I mean, is it going anywhere? Why do you have to rush to get there? And yet, there they were, running to the tomb. And they were a little more brave than Mary. They walked right in, and they looked around, and they saw that there was nobody in there. And then they looked at the linen wrappings, and they were all scattered around in the tomb. Nothing else was in the tomb. Turned around, and they walked home. Walked, not run. And on top of that, they had not solved Mary's problem. After all, she went to them. They were men. They were supposed to find the body. They didn't do anything. All they did was walk home. I wonder what they were thinking about when they walked home that day. Were they wondering? Were they curious? Were they confused? You see, I remember all the times I walked home from church when I drifted in for Easter. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I really, 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 really want to believe this. And I'm quite positive something happened. But then I walked home. Until next year, when I went back. You see, there was something like Peter and John. Something drew me there. Something made me very curious. But then I just walked home like they did. They probably would have stayed there for a good long while. I mean home, not at the tomb. You see, because now Mary is the only person at the tomb yet again. She is alone. And now finally she can get to the hard work of weeping and mourning, but her curiosity got the best of her. So she actually went and she creeped forward and walked all the way into the tomb, and she saw 2 angels. Another surprise. Who knows where those angels came from, but they had the strangest question in the world to ask her. Mary, why are you weeping? Why am I weeping? Well, you 2 are sitting right in the spot where my Lord was laid. That's why I'm weeping. And the angels, they were right there. And she said to them, somebody had to have stolen the body. And now my Lord is not only dead, he is missing. Now that's a pretty hard thing to accomplish, be both dead and missing. So Mary Magdalene finally walked out, kind of slowly. But as she was sort of backing out and turning around, she almost ran into Jesus. He was standing right there. How about that? Although she didn't think it was Jesus, of course, because he looked like a gardener. I mean, he had, dirt under his fingernails. He looked like any kind of ordinary person who, by the way, might have been the person who stole the body. And so she asked him, where did you lay that body? Because if you tell me, I will get it and I will put it back in here where it belongs. And then Jesus said, Mary. Oh my. This is when the whole story reaches its climax. That one moment when it all fell together and Mary knew, this is Jesus. And what did she do when she finally recognized who he was? She wanted to hug him like you would hug a child that you haven't seen for 20 years who might have changed a little bit in appearance and gets off the airport and runs toward you. You would embrace that child as hard as you could. You know what Jesus said to her? He said, let go of me. What? See, the comedy never ends in this story. The reason why Jesus wanted her to let go of him is because he wanted her to know that he was going up. Up. He says, I am going up to my Father and your Father. I'm going up to my God and your God. And then he did something that he had never done before. All those people that he called servants and friends and disciples all the way through Scripture, he called them brothers and sisters. Everybody was going to go up to one Father. They were one big family. Wow. On the day that Marge died, about a week ago, I was in the room with her, along with many members of her family and and many friends. And Marge wasn't able to talk, but she had her ways of communicating. And one of her ways of communicating was to lift her arm and point her finger up. Now, I asked Sue about this. I said, what is that? And Sue just looked at me and says, oh, she wants to go to God. I said, that's what that means? She said, yeah, she wants to go to God. And so the next time she raised her finger up, I said, yes. Marge was going up to God, just like Jesus was going up to his Father and our Father. So tell me, what brought you here today? You know, Easter has a way of getting into the parts of our hearts that are deep and the places where we have both faith and doubt. They're kind of quiet little out-of-the-way corners in our hearts where both faith and doubt reside. You know, faith requires only one thing, and that is doubt. If you had no doubt, you would not need faith. Any faith worth its salt is accompanied by some form of doubt. Because the opposite of faith is certainty, cold, sterile certainty. No room for humor, no room for laughing, no room for wondering. Everything is settled. That is the opposite of faith. So if you came here doubting today a little bit, join the crowd. Doubt is a good environment for faith to grow in. And that is indeed what happened with the disciples. Because you know, when Peter and John went home, well, they didn't believe anything. You know what they called what Mary said? They called them idle tales. And they were told by women. You see, any gospel writer who wanted to prove to us that Jesus was raised from the dead would never have the very first person who saw him and talked to him be a woman. Because the testimony of a woman was worth nothing in those days. And yet, here we have Mary. And here we have all of you. Coming, maybe not running, but coming here on an Easter morning. Wondering like Mary, what is inside that tomb? Is there anything in there? And what happened to it? And is Jesus still alive? And is he still with us? And to all of that, I answer, yes. Yes. We are going up. Up to our Father and Jesus' Father. Up to his God and our God. And up together as a family of brothers and sisters. That is the story of Easter. So, when you go home today, I hope you'll take a little time to maybe even have a little bit of laughter. Why? Because years before Jesus was raised from the dead, an angel came and told Sarah that she was going to have a baby when she was 90, and she laughed. And that has been called the Easter laugh. Possibility, life, wonder, hope. These are the things of Easter. Someone said, Jesus probably, when he walked out of that tomb, the first thing he did was laugh. So as you leave this place, whether you're coming back in a year or in a week or in a month, take some time for an Easter laugh. It's God's way of saying to you and to me, fooled ya.